With midterms behind us, the White House is looking ahead to the 2024 presidential election. President Biden recently met with the Democratic National Committee to propose a new primary season calendar. The new nominating process would go in this order: South Carolina, then 3 days later, New Hampshire and Nevada, then Georgia, then Michigan. Originally, Iowa and New Hampshire were first in the nominating process, but the tradition has faced backlash in recent years because they are two predominantly white states and they are not representative of the country.
Joining us now to discuss is Executive Director of Swing Left, Yasmin Radjy. Yasmin, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, Ravi and Batya. It's great to meet you.
So how do you feel about this new potential schedule? I'm happy just because Iowa should be punished for the screw-ups that we have come to characterize of that state in the length of the counting, et cetera. But what do you make of the new schedule?
As a former Iowa resident, at a personal level, I'm sad. But in all seriousness, you know, I'm the executive director at Swing Left, and we don't take any positions in primaries. So we are sort of waiting to see how this all goes. But we also are an organization that really believes in democracy, small d democracy, and any actions that the party is taking that are going to advance democracy. And something that we saw and what we heard from President Biden was his commitment to end caucuses because of their undemocratic nature, particularly for working folks taking the day off of work at specified times and moving around a room. It is a process that sort of in a different era may have made sense. But for where people are right now and the way that how many jobs people are working, it's just not something that is tenable from a small d democracy standpoint, and also for working families. So we celebrate that and are excited to see where things end up.
Yasmin, thank you so much for joining us. You know, my first thought when I heard this was the big loser in this would be somebody like Bernie Sanders, right? Somebody on the progressive left who has really failed to get any traction with Black voters who tend to be much more moderate. So I'm wondering, do you think that this is likely to have an impact on the kinds of candidates we're going to see from the Democratic Party, pulling it more to the center and away from the progressive left, perhaps?
You know, I think that what we're seeing right now is that whether candidates are to the center or to the left, candidates on the Democratic side are tremendously united on trying to pass really big reforms, including, you know, the IRA this year, the American Rescue Plan last year. And so that's something that we found is a very unifying theme this cycle. And this midterm cycle, you know, at Swing Left, we've got volunteers on the left and on the right, and we support candidates, sorry, not on the left and on the right, on the left and to the center within the Democratic Party, but within the Democratic spectrum, really spanning a wide array of ideologies. And across that array of candidates in the Democratic Party and across that array of volunteers, we're really finding that people are frankly exhausted with the stalemates that they are seeing among Republicans that we're worried are going to continue in this election. And whether it's about the presidential election, whether it's about down ballot elections, whether it's about these past midterms, what volunteers and candidates alike really want to be doing is figuring out what are the solutions for American families. And at Swing Left, we're really proud to support candidates in their general elections who are ready to get things done for American families.
This past election was such a better result for Democrats than I think many people expected,
Absolutely.
almost everyone expected. Joe Biden, I think, deservedly getting a lot of credit for that, actually. Maybe also the calm strategist for Democrats, the whole democracy, rhetoric, abortion, et cetera. Everything they were doing, people said maybe that wasn't going to work or try to pick holes in it, but it appears to have worked. You know, what is your perspective on the success of the messaging? Joe Biden turning out to, even in the face of some economic issues, a lot of frustrations people have, people sticking with him or liking him better than pundits do, or that the dialogue or the political narrative expects them to? You know, what's your view of that?
I mean, I think the biggest lesson for us about this midterm is that when the polls look doom and gloom, the best solution is to organize. And I think that so much of the pundit class was really emphasizing that there was no chance to win. And what we heard time and time again at Swing Left from volunteers on the ground was that's not what they were hearing on the ground. They were talking to Republicans, they were talking to independents, and they were talking to Democrats at the doors, and they were hearing a lot more enthusiasm about what this election was about, and also a lot of real anger fear about the MAGA takeover of the Republican Party. And so we've seen that in the results. I think this was a real referendum on the MAGA wing of the Democratic Party. But we also saw, I mean, I'm so glad that you brought up abortion rights. This is an issue that 77% of Americans agree on at a high level of making sure that there is a constitutional right to abortion and that people can have access to a safe and legal abortion. And what we've seen in so many states is that the Republican legislatures have taken things far too far. Places like Georgia, which I know we're going to talk about later, passing things like 6-week bans, which are, before most women know that they're pregnant. And with the overturning of Roe, I think that really showed voters all across the country that this is, what's happening in this country is far out of step with where mainstream Americans are, whether they're Republicans, Democrats, or independents.
Yeah, Yasmin, I could not agree with you more about, what you just said about abortion. I think you're definitely right about that. I wanted to ask you, though, with the 7 days paid sick leave vote that we just had in the Senate for rail workers, you had 6 very prominent, some of them very MAGA Republicans joining with nearly all Democrats, except for Joe Manchin, to give paid sick leave to these rail workers and not marginal folks, right? Marco Rubio, Ted Cruz, Josh Hawley. I'm wondering, do you think that there is any opportunity there for kind of realignment around economic populist goals that might be in our near future?
Yeah, I think Senator Sanders said, Ted Cruz, I've always known that you were a socialist. I think what Americans all around the country are thirsty for is solutions. And I really think that in a moment where we're entering a divided Congress, as Robbie mentioned, these midterms shaped out for Democrats far better than we could have ever imagined. And our hope at Swing Left and what we hear from volunteers is that there's a real hope that in a moment where even in a divided Congress, even with all of the despair that folks may feel about our body politic, that there is some effort to center working families to find solutions because people are struggling and these should not be partisan issues. Now, that is our hope and our aspiration. I think my concern is that I really, really worry that the takeover of the Republican Party by the MAGA extreme wing has disincentivized any real sort of bipartisan work. And what we're seeing is that, the only folks that really are offering solutions and that are supporting democracy at scale at the federal and at the state level are Democrats in this moment. Now, I hope that I am wrong because I think what we all share as a priority is really that solutions are found for people and that families that want to put food on the table are able to do so. Families that want to, have a dignified life with a living wage are able to find that. But I just think increasingly the Republican Party has gotten so extreme and has gotten so co-opted by the Trump wing of the party that I am not going to hold my breath, but I do hope for that. And then in 2024, if there is not, that sort of sensible work on the Republican Party, I think we'll see the results in the 2024 polls when Democrats, like they did this election, are going to continue to fight to make sure that there's actual solutions for working families.
Well, speaking of Donald Trump, before we let you go, we want to get your take on this from former White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki, sharing her thoughts on former President Trump's third run for office. Let's take a listen.
I mean, I think Democrats and sane Republicans underestimate Trump at their own peril because in order for Trump not to win the nomination, there has to be a better alternative. That's how primaries work, right? Ron DeSantis, he's either the savior or he's currently at his peak. Mike Pence, with all due respect, didn't exactly light the world on fire politically before he was selected by Donald Trump to be his running mate. So the question is, who's the alternative? Trump has some evil charisma that helps him win the nomination. The nomination process is long. What is going to happen here? And my view is people should not underestimate him.
Yeah, I don't think Mike Pence has any chance. It's Trump or it's DeSantis. DeSantis, though, I don't know if he's peaked. He hasn't peaked in terms of name recognition. He's well known to conservative media, but he's going to become better known to the public at large. How are Democrats thinking about, probably there's a perverse hope that it's Donald Trump because he's been beaten by Democrats kind of soundly almost twice now for counting the midterm result as having had something to do with Trump's influence, whereas someone like DeSantis had a really huge victory in Florida. It was really almost the only good news that Republicans had. Is there a first desire for it to be Trump, even though Democrats hate Trump, but think he might be beatable than any alternative?
You know, I think something that we saw this election cycle, as you know, is that the cancer of Trumpism really metastasized, not just in the federal candidates that we saw, but also in the state candidates. So we were in an election where 60% of the Republicans on the ballot, 60% of Americans had an election denier on the ballot, and a third of the Republicans running this cycle were flat-out election deniers. So not people who were sort of flirting with the concept of election denial, but were flat-out hardcore election deniers. And so I think what that tells me is that it's not about Trump anymore. It's not whether it's Trump at the top of the ballot, whether it's DeSantis, whoever it is, there is a truly concerning anti-democratic, small d democratic cancer, frankly, that is running through the Republican Party. And that's why I feel really confident, just like we saw in this midterm cycle. Democrats broke from any historical trends, broke from all conventional wisdom in standing up against that. And Republicans and independents were fed up too. And that's why, Democrats did really, really well with independents this cycle. And I know in 2024, whether it's Trump, whether it's DeSantis, whether it's Ted Cruz, whoever it may be, I feel really, really confident that because the Republican Party has gotten so extreme, Democrats are going to have a strong showing. And we'll see who they pick on the Republican side.
Well, we'll see about that. Yasmin, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you, thank you. Thank you, Batya.
Thanks, Yasmin.
We'll have more Rising right after this. Stay with us.